Hey guys, in this video I'll be comparing 1993 versus 1995 Dorian Yates, 1993 being on the left and 1995 being on the right for the entire video. Now, a lot of people claim both versions to be his best, so in this video I'll try my best to analyze both years to see which physique was really his ultimate form. One thing to keep in mind is that the picture quality is much worse for 1995 compared to 93, so don't let the initial pictures deceive you. You really need to look hard at each photo to compare the conditioning and muscularity, since it is pretty hard to miss them at first glance. I've seen a lot of comparisons that don't necessarily do justice to 1995, so I'll try my best to not bias the 1993 version, my personal favorite showing of Dorian. Now, before the video does start, if you guys enjoy my content, a like and sub would be much appreciated as it helps grow the channel. With that all being said, let's get into this video. Alright, here's the first pose, the front double bicep, and in this one you can see the rather apparent flaw that 1995 had. Dorian had torn his bicep before the 1994 Olympia, and in my opinion, came in a little bit off as well. However, in 1995, he came in dry to the bone but with a noticeable injury. In contrast, Dorian's 1993 package is nearly flawless, showcasing perfect symmetry in the arms and cleaner separation in the quads, and the crazy lighting is only helping 1993's case. Both look very comparable in terms of muscularity, specifically in the lats, chest, forearms, and calves, so let's take a look at a different set of pictures. Alright, these two pictures are taken at different angles, but now present a fair comparison. You can notice that 95 had very dry conditioning and great separation in the quads, but still 1993 beats 95 in that area, still showcasing superior separation and aligns in the quads. Now, both versions are comparable in conditioning and size. However, one doesn't have a glaring weakness, that being 1993, so 93 will take this pose. Here is Dorian's best pose in my opinion, the front lat spread. Immediately I noticed that the conditioning is very similar for both of them, similar quad separation, chest striations, and arm definition. Now don't let the washed out lights of 95 fool you, Dorian was certainly conditioned. That being said, do I think he was as conditioned as 93? No, I don't think so. I think 93 was just a tad bit more shredded than 95, which is evident in these first few shots. I will say that Dorian's lats in 1995 do look tremendous, but they do look just as good in 93 as well. Honestly, this shot is a rather easy one to judge since there are so many similarities, so it should be no surprise that his 1993 version ever so slightly will win this one. The side chest pose has never been a standout shot for Dorian, but he sure did master the pose. In both years, you can see his trademark grainy granite skin quality, which looks amazing. 1993 presents deeper cuts in the quad ham tie-in, along with a bit more detail. However, 1995 looks just as dry in that area, and this difference could easily be due to a difference in lighting and the camera. Size-wise, both look tremendous. However, 95 really impresses me since that front pec looks super dense and the far one looks thicker than 93. Similar to the last two poses, the size difference is negligible, and the conditioning between the upper and lower halves are very comparable. That being said, Dorian's 95 version looks a lot more statuesque. Personally, I'd give this one to 95 because of that. However, it is so close that 93 could win here as well. Both versions look superb, but I've got to give it to 95. The rear double is also one of Dorian's best poses, and here you can notice that the conditioning in the lower half is very similar between the two. I've always found it weird that certain cameras wouldn't pick up on Dorian's insanely shredded conditioning, while others would. Anyways, looking at the upper halves, you can see that both years have nearly identical development in the traps, shoulders, arms, and overall width. The lats in 1993 are sort of obscured in shadow. However, looking ever so closely will show that they are relatively similar in size. I would maybe give 1995 an edge here though, as the lats do extend a bit more, but 95 would also fall behind in the arms due to the slight asymmetry in the bicep. Conditioning wise, the lower lats for both look extremely shredded, and the amount of detail and just overall definition is just as apparent. While it is rather close, I've got to give this one to 93 because of the better set of arms and comparable back development. When things are this close, even the smallest imperfections can make or break the pose, so 93 would win this one. Here's the rear lat spread, and in this one you can see that there looks to be a dramatic difference in lower body condition. This picture for 95 is definitely not the most flattering, lacking any supernatural lighting, while for 1993 it is out of this world in terms of the ultra flattering lighting. I do have a more fair comparison to look at, however the angle of these two pictures is definitely much more similar overall, so we can discern the size, shape, etc. Back for back, both look just as wide and developed, and the lower body silhouette is very similar. Just for some proof, take a look at this shot for 1995 of Dorian's back. He was extremely conditioned, and you can see that his glutes are just as striated as the rear lat spread for 1993 that we just looked at. Remember guys, differences in cameras, lighting, and timing all play roles in the way a person will look on stage. Now, I briefly showcased a Christmas tree transition shot for Dorian's 1995 version. However, I wanted to take a closer look at both years in this transitional pose. You can see that Dorian's lats appear more feathered in 93, however, he looks a lot fuller in 95 throughout the lats and traps. Lower bodies look very similar, and overall this is a very impressive, unique pose for Dorian that showcases his crazy conditioning in both years. Anyways, let's get back to the rear lat spread. Alright, here's a second look at the rear lat spread, and now you can see the conditioning that I was talking about for 1995. Now the lower bodies look very similar, and so do the backs in terms of separation and conditioning. If anything, it seems as if 1995 has better lats, and now that the arms are taken out of the equation, I might just go ahead and give 1995 the upper half. Like I said, the lower bodies are basically equal, so in all honesty, I'd give this one to 1995. Here's the side tricep, and unfortunately both pictures are cut off right above the calf. However, we all know that Dorian had some of the greatest calves of all time. That being said, the side legs of both look very similar in terms of separation, showcasing identical depth to the quad ham tie-in, as well as practically the exact same line in the quad. Both showcase comparable tricep development, along with the large, dry delts. However, 1995 looks a bit drier in the midsection. There also appears to be more detail in the entire arm for 93. However, the flash from the camera in 95 may be washing out the details in the upper body. This second look shows that Dorian had just as much detail in the upper half in 1995. Arm, shoulder, chest, and midsection look to be about the same for both, and the legs look basically identical too. So I don't think I've ever done this in a video, but this one will definitely have to result in a tie. You guys let me know down below which year you think looks better. However, I think this pose is objectively even. The ab and thigh was never really an amazing pose for Dorian. However, earlier on in his career, his midsection was still rather small, and his huge lats flared out to create an incredible V-taper. You can see that both years feature similar quad separation, midsection size and definition, and conditioning overall. The angles are slightly off, so I can't accurately assess the V-tapers. However, I chose these two pictures to look at the overall conditioning and muscularity first, rather than the shape. Here is a second look at the ab and thigh, and you can see that Dorian's lats in 95 look a bit better than in 1993, by a very small amount, which is also seen in the rear lat spread and rear double. This makes his V-taper look a bit better, and I think it is undeniable that 1995 looks a bit better in that regard for both sets of pictures. 93 looks great too, and this pose is definitely extremely close. Very, similar physiques in both years. However, my eyes are drawn to 95 in both comparisons of this pose. Alright, here's the last pose, the most muscular, and this pose is rather unfair since the angles are slightly different for both. That being said, this pose was not judged back then, so it's not super important to the comparison. We can judge it though, and looking at the pose overall, I guess, I noticed that both have great conditioning in the chest, arms, and quads. However, 1993 does look a bit better in all those areas by a very small margin. Like I said though, the angles are off for 1993, so it makes him look a little bit bigger due to the lower angle of the shot. It is actually pretty tough to judge though, so let's take a look at another picture. Here's the crab variation of the most muscular, and now it is definitely easier to judge this pose. Looking at the arms, both have very dry, granite-like conditioning and solid muscularity. However, 95 has that bicep tear, which is noticeable, but he does have a much fuller and thicker chest. The traps even look to be a bit better for 95, and he looks a bit drier and harder. 93 does show more noticeable conditioning in the arms and quads. However, 95's fullness does look remarkable. I honestly have never seen Dorian look this good in the most muscular for 95, so I may just give him the nod in that pose. He just looks a lot freakier in it, whereas 1993 looks a bit underwhelming in terms of wow factor. Alright guys, that about does it for this video. In summary, I had 1995 beating 1993 in the 8 poses that I covered, which may be surprising to some of you diehard Dorianites. 95 won the rear lat spread, side chest, ab and thigh, and most muscular. However, the most muscular wasn't a judged pose, so keep that in mind. Now, if you do go with that notion, this comparison would end in a tie, which I think is a rather fair outcome. The side tricep was objectively even in my opinion, which means that it could have gone either way, so that could be a deciding factor in which version you would have winning. That being said, I think that 1993 had a much more shredded look in most of the poses, while 1995 was fuller, which was definitely evident in the back and chest. Both versions are equal in my opinion though, bringing in different yet just as impressive looks to the stage. Let me know down below which year you do prefer. If you guys agree that both are just as good as the other, let me know down below if you guys agree with that. And I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.